The drama surrounding 12 WNBA legends putting their reputations on the line to talk about one player doesn't feel like a standard tribute reel. It feels like a reckoning. For years, women's basketball has begged the wider sports world to stop looking away, to stop treating excellence like a niche. And then Caitlin Clark arrived, dragging camera trucks and sold-out arenas behind her like a comet tail. What happened next wasn't just a surge in attention. It was a reshuffling of power. When veterans and MVPs, champions and standard-bearers begin to rewrite their own earlier takes in real time, you can hear a league recalibrating its voice. The early skepticism, whispers that a college phenom would be humbled by the physicality and grind, didn't just fade. And even critics were forced to admit the obvious. The sport had found its accelerant. Context is everything. When a player rises this fast, the temptation is to keep the conversation on the surface. Shooting range, logo threes, the bravado to pull up when others would probe and reset. But that's not what seasoned greats are seeing. What they talk about unprompted is pace control. It's the way possession after possession turns into a test of temperature. How quickly Clark senses a defender's hips. How she sells a transition threat just to create a back cut for a wing who hasn't touched the ball in 3 trips. How she toggles between spectacle and simplicity without breaking eye contact with the weak side help. That is why someone like Breanna Stewart didn't wait for consensus. She recognized early the difference between hot streak and operating system. She spoke about gravity like it was measurable weight, about spacing like it was oxygen, about passing angles that slit open a defense before the rotation even starts. And when Stewart says it out loud, it licenses everyone else to say what they already know. The court is longer and wider now, and there's a rookie making it feel that way. Candace. Parker's endorsement landed like a gavel because it reframed the conversation from women's basketball phenomenon to basketball phenomenon. Her comparison wasn't cosplay, she wasn't crowning a successor to anyone in particular. She was describing the effect. The way a gym inhales when a shooter crosses the timeline, the way antagonists sharpen themselves against a star because greatness demands a foil, the way even away crowds show up just to boo, which is a twisted kind of love. Parker's point was simple and devastating. Must-see basketball is rare, and when you have it, you don't negotiate with it. You platform it. If defenses now shade a step and a half farther out than they did last year, if a hedge happens 2 dribbles earlier than it used to, that is not hype. That is geometry. And geometry does not apologize. Tina Charles didn't wrap her respect in marketing language. She spoke the way lifers speak about the game. She talked about feeling the shift in the arena, the hum that spreads through a crowd when anticipation becomes habit. She talked about the gratitude of being present, the peculiar joy of seeing a sport you've carried on your back suddenly sprint ahead of you with a generation that dares without asking. For a scorer with her resume to call it a privilege to share the floor with the new wave isn't ceremony, it's testimony. The subtext matters. Veterans don't compliment recklessly. They have seen too much to mistake a moment for a movement. When they call it a movement, believe them. And then there is the thread that runs from Maya Moore to a kid in Iowa who once sprinted across a court for a signature. That thread is not just nostalgia, it is infrastructure. You can feel it in the footage of their reunion, in the way awe turns to kinship almost instantly. Moore's career taught a generation how to win with grace and ferocity braided together. And Clark has been paying that forward in real time, lingering with fans, telling stories about why the extra minute matters, modeling what it looks like when your favorite player makes you feel seen. Moments like that do not show up in the box score, but they explain the box office. When past and present meet in the tunnel and stay a little too long, a sport gets continuity. It gets roots. Nneka Ogwumiki's voice lands with the authority of a union leader and the generosity of a teammate who knows how hard it is to keep composure when the world wants a soundbite. Her praise wasn't loud. It was definitive. You can't deny impact. You can't deny professionalism. You can't deny that the All-Star stage looked a little bigger because someone insisted on stretching it. Coming from a player whose words are measured by design, that kind of acknowledgement functions like a seal. It tells younger players how to interpret what they're seeing and older ones how to frame what they're feeling. Not encroachment, enhancement. Cynthia Cooper's verdict carried the weight of origin story. When the game's architects talk about court vision, they are calibrating against standards most fans never see. If Cooper says the passing is great, that's not flattery. It's certification. It cuts through the lazier narratives that reduce Clark's threat profile to deep threes and heat checks. Great passers make trust contagious. They pull defenders one step too far, yes, but more importantly, they convince teammates to keep cutting because the ball will arrive on time even if the window is closing. That is why the offense breathes differently when she plays. That is why veteran bigs sprint lanes with a teenager's joy. That is why shooters hold their follow-throughs a beat longer. They're rehearsing for the replay that will be clipped and sent everywhere overnight. Aja Wilson's public grace in a media ecosystem obsessed with rivalry says as much about her as it does about Clark champions. Don't fear spotlights. They multiply them. Wilson understands that a rising tide isn't an aphorism. It's a scheduling reality, a ratings reality, a sponsorship reality that puts better resources into every locker room. Elena Del Don's appraisal of processing speed and pre-read vision rounded out the scouting report from the vantage point of a savant. You can hear in her language the quiet awe of recognition. The game has gears most never reach, and this kid is already shifting into them. Which brings us back to the reversal that made headlines, because reversals always do. Diana Taurasi's pivot didn't sound like capitulation. It sounded like evolution. The game had asked hard questions and got harder answers back. Could a rookie absorb contact, decipher pace traps, carry the burden of being the story every night without turning brittle? The answer, imperfect and human and therefore more impressive, was yes. Not every night, not effortlessly, but in a way that scaled from novelty to normal. That's why Sue Bird's revelation about mentorship landed with such tenderness. It explained the poise. Hidden in those private conversations is a lexicon of survival, how to compartmentalize, how to metabolize criticism, how to turn the volume down without turning the joy off. If you want to know why the glare hasn't washed her out, that's your answer. A lineage of guards teaching another how to steer through weather. None of this cancels the realities of 2025, the injuries, the absences, the stretches where the show must pause so the body can catch up. In some ways, those gaps made the endorsements louder. You notice the size of a presence by its absence. Broadcasts feel thinner. Buildings feel dimmer. The calendar feels longer. That's not marketing spin. That's pulse. You can measure it in jersey sales and ratings if you like, but the truer metric is the way people keep refreshing their feeds for one update. When is she back? The league has learned the lesson in plain terms. This isn't just good for the fever. It is good for the fabric. Stars who alter the conversation, alter the conditions under which everyone else works, eats, and dreams. You don't argue with that. You build around it. If this deep